Thank you. And I'm gonna, Marjorie, if it's okay, if you could place yourself on mute here on Zoom. Thank you. Okay, folks, if everybody can mute, we'll get started here shortly. Good evening. Welcome to this second public listening session of the Racial Equity in Policing Commission of Salt Lake City. I'm Larry Schooler. As we told you in January, we all want to feel safe. We all want to be treated fairly and equitably. How we do that, how we ensure racial equity in the policing of our community is a very complicated question with lots of possible answers. Over the last several months, the Racial Equity in Policing Commission has been working tirelessly to answer that question and to improve the outcomes for everyone in their interactions with law enforcement. Tonight, they want to share their recommendations and then listen to your reactions and suggestions. And so just as it was at our last listening session tonight, you, the people of Salt Lake City, are the guests of honor. Your mayor, your city council, members of the police department, and most importantly, members of the Racial Equity in Policing Commission are all here to listen to your perspectives. You will be having the mic and it will be your turn. If you're already listening on the phone, I'd ask you to just stand by. We're going to have some questions for you in just a moment. You can also press 0 to immediately get into our on-air commenter queue, and we'll be able to take your comments live on the air. We're going to go to the next couple of slides on our presentation to be able to give you some information about how to join us tonight. We'll go one more slide just so we can share the call-in numbers. If you are interested in joining us tonight by phone, you can call 888-410-3427 to participate in English. That's 888-410-3427. En español, 844-881-1317. Participar en español. Again, the number on the screen for Spanish simulcast is 844-881-1317. I'd like to introduce our Mandarin interpreter tonight, Marjorie Lin, if she's there. And Marjorie, if you could say hello and share with folks how to join our Mandarin simulcast.
好，大家好。假如你今天想要用中文参与的话，请你拨打888-849-5231，888-849-5231。
谢谢. Thank you so much, Marjorie. And I believe we have Ray Ziet, an Arabic interpreter on the line. Ray, if you're there, if you could let folks know how to join in Arabic.
مرحبا كيفكم مساء الخير. احنا اليوم نتشارك بالبرنامج عشان تعدد العناية بأشخاص، وتقدروا تتصلوا بالرقم 888-848-6122. شكرا.
Shukran to you, Ray. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Marjorie and Ray for enabling us to increase access to tonight's program. And I just want to let those know who are listening to this program in those languages that we're going to attempt to incorporate comments from all 4 languages into our program tonight. So we invite you to dial in and share your comments. But if we go to the next slide, I want to share with you other ways that you can participate tonight without having to call in. So in a moment, you'll see a slide with ways you can participate digitally. So if you're on the computer, if you're streaming us tonight, and it would be easiest for you to go to a website, you can go to www.pollev.com/KWPoll1. And that's available either on a computer or a smartphone at pollev.com/KWPoll1. You'll see that address frequently throughout our program. If you would like to join us via text message, you can also do that by texting the phrase KWPoll1 to the phone number 22333. That's KW poll 1. That's your text message. And the phone number you're texting to will be 22333. On the next slide, I kind of give you a little bit of a clearer way to participate. So if we can go to the next slide, you'll see a graphic depiction of how to join via a web browser. Let me also note that our American Sign Language interpreters have joined us tonight, and we want to thank them so much for increasing access for our community as well. So there you can see a way to join via browser. You'll go to that website, you'll put your name in. You don't have to, but you can, and then press continue, and you'll begin to see polls in just a moment. If we can go to the next slide, you'll see how to participate on your smartphone. It's much the same as it would be if you were joining by computer. And then last but not least, if we can go one more slide up, you'll see the text messaging instructions. So on the next slide, you'll see guidance for text messaging. So the phone number you're texting to is 22333. You just text the phrase KW poll 1. It's not case sensitive, but you do have to text it exactly with no spaces. KW poll 1 and hit send, and that will put you into the polls for tonight. Again, you text to 22333 and then KW poll 1, and then you will be ready to go. And we are now ready to initiate some poll questions to you all. So those of you who are listening by phone, if you'll stand by, you will hear the question read to you by our call screeners, and I will be helping folks who are watching on screen. So if we can move to the next question. I want to know what part of Salt Lake City you are living in or working in. Those of you who are joining us, what part of Salt Lake City do you live in or work in? So if you would say Sugar House, you would text the letter A once you've joined the polls. Downtown or Central City would be B. Glendale or Poplar Grove would be C. Rose Park or Northwest Quadrant would be D. Liberty Wells E. Avenues University East Bench would be F. And if you're joining us from outside of Salt Lake City, you would text G. And I would encourage our commissioners, our mayor and city council, all of our invited guests to participate, just so we can get a sense for where everybody is joining us from. Again, you can either go to the website that's shown at the top of the screen, pollev.com/KW poll 1, or you can text KW poll 1 to 22333 just once. And then once that text goes through, you can just use the letter of your choice to text where you're from. Again, Sugar House would be A, Downtown or Central City would be B, Glendale or Poplar Grove would be C, Rose Park or the Northwest Quadrant would be D, Liberty Wells would be E, Avenues University East Bench would be F, and if you don't live in Salt Lake City, you would be pressing G. It does appear that we're getting good representation from across Salt Lake City tonight. Again, if you're just joining us, this is the second listening session for the Racial Equity in Policing Commission of Salt Lake City. I'm your host, Larry Schooler, and I'm joined by Mayor Mendenhall, members of the City Council, folks from the Salt Lake City Police Department, and most importantly, members of the Racial Equity in Policing Commission. And right now, we're just taking a couple of poll questions to get a sense for who's joined us on the line tonight. So as you can see on screen, you can respond via web or via text to our questions, and you can also join us by calling in. So we'll give it just another 10 seconds or so, and then we will continue with our next question. It's great to see folks from all across the community joining us. Let's go ahead, if we can, and advance to our next poll question. This question asks, what is your race or ethnicity? How do you identify by race or ethnicity? So for American Indian or Alaska Native, you would type A. Black or African American would be B, African would be C, Hispanic, Latino, or Chicano would be D, Middle Eastern would be E, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander would be F, Southeast Asian would be G, white would be H, or another race or ethnicity not listed here would be I. If you've been joining us by text, you don't have to do anything other than just punch in the letter of your choice. If you think you may have typed in the wrong answer, you can always press clear and it'll take your answer off of the poll and you can re-enter. But otherwise, you can just go with the letters that are on the screen to share your response. Again, what is your race or ethnicity? American Indian or Alaska Native would be A, Black or African American would be B, African would be C, Hispanic, Latino, or Chicano would be D, Middle Eastern would be E, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander F, Southeast Asian G, white H, or other race or ethnicity, aye. We'll give it just another couple of seconds to have folks finish responding. And I noticed that there are a number of folks that have joined us by phone, and we look forward to hearing some of their comments here as we continue. Let's go on to our next poll question. The Racial Equity and Policing Commission has divided itself into 3 different subcommittees, one focused on training, one focused on policies and practices, and one focused on school safety. So we're curious which of those topics you may most want the Racial Equity and Policing Commission to help change. Obviously, there could be high needs in all 3 of those categories, but we're curious which of the 3 are most critical to you in terms of a current priority. If you would say training, you would choose A, text us A, or use the online system to press A. Policies and practices would be B. Safety at our schools would be C. And if there's something else that you would share with us on that front, you would choose D. And again, we have folks who can call in and make their responses by telephone as well, and give their responses by touch-tone phone. But if you're joining us on TV and want to give us your feedback via text message or by online, here are your options. Again, what do you most want the Racial Equity and Policing Commission to help change? If it's training, A, policies and practices, B, school safety, C, or if it's something else, go ahead and type in D. Looks like the folks responding so far, we have a lot of folks interested in policies and practices. I can see from our phone respondents that a lot of folks are also interested in training as well. We'll go to one more slide just to give folks a chance to share anything else that they would like to see. It'll be the next poll, the open-ended question there. Just want to ask if there is anything else that the commission should be focused on changing that wasn't enumerated in that last set of options. We'd love for you to share that with us. So if it's something other than training, policies and practices, or school safety, you're welcome to just send us an open-ended text message with that input. You can also go online and type in that suggestion as well. So again, what else other than training, policies and practices, or school safety would you like to see the Racial Equity and Policing Commission be focused on changing? You can just type a text message to the same phone number, 22333, or you can go to pollev.com/KW poll 1 to be able to input your selection. So we appreciate someone already giving us a response on that. And for those who are listening by phone, if you'll press 0, you are free to get into our speaker queue and potentially share with us on air what else you think the Racial Equity and Policing Commission should be focused on changing. So we will leave this up here for just a bit to allow for the answers to scroll through, but we appreciate folks giving some additional insight into their priorities. And I will say, as I look at these answers, including more mental health workers and fewer police and culture changes, I know that those are actually on the minds of the commission, and we'll be getting into that here in just a bit. So you can continue to send in your responses by texting to 22333 or going to pollev.com/KW poll 1. If you are listening on the phone, you can press 0 and be able to speak to a call screener. We're going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen and go back to camera view here for just a moment. Again, welcome to this listening session. And I want to particularly say hello to some of our distinguished guests. I see Mayor Erin Mendenhall, who helped to initiate the Racial Equity and Policing Commission, who's joined us tonight. And Mayor Mendenhall, welcome.
Thank you, Larry. I'm happy to be here.
Is there anything you would like for the community to know about your interests in hearing from them tonight?
Yes, thank you for tuning in whatever medium you are. Welcome to everyone who's watching and calling in tonight. And thank you to our commissioners for the work that they've done so far and for their commitment to the city and the progress that we are making and we are making with your guidance. I want to also thank all of the members of the city family across departments who've helped to facilitate and hopefully enable the information and the processes that you are making recommendations on. I'm here tonight to listen to the members of our community who I know have important things to say, and I know that our commissioners are listening with both ears also. It takes a lot of courage to share. And I want to thank everyone tonight for being willing to help us grow. And also shout out to Larry, your team, and you for providing so many different ways for people to engage. I know that we have an hour tonight together, but that this commission is listening all the time. And there's many different ways to contribute and let us hear your experience and your input. So thank you for attending tonight. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks so much, Mayor. I see Councilmember Amy Fowler, the chair of the Salt Lake City Council. Would love for her to say hello, see what she'd like to hear tonight.
Hi, Larry. Thank you so much for having us and for organizing this second listening session of the REP. I really am I second a lot of the things that the mayor said, and I'm really just here to listen to our community. I know that our council is committed to listening to the recommendations of the REP. It is important to us, and we have, as I said, we're definitely committed to listening to the recommendations and implementing those recommendations that we can and continuing the conversations that we can have. And the input from the community is the most important for us. And I just want to thank you for putting together this forum where we can have an opportunity to just really sit and listen to people's concerns, their experiences, and their stories. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and I see council members Mono and Dugan. Welcome to you both. Nice to have you with us. It's amazing to have so many folks paying attention to these important issues. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here. I hope I didn't miss any city council members. Councilmember Fowler, please let me know if I do. I also want to say hello to one of our, here I'm going to get this wrong, I'm sure. I think it's either Deputy Chief or Assistant Chief Purvis from the Salt Lake City Police Department. Chief, I'll leave it at Chief. Good to have you.
Thanks, Larry. On behalf of the police department, we want to thank the commission for everything they've done. It's been a real learning experience for us, and we expect to continue to learn from it. So thank you.
Thanks. And we should note that Chief Brown, I believe, is in transit from a conference, and we hope that he'll be able to connect at some point. But thank you so much, Chief Purvis, for being with us. So as you can see from all of the squares across the screen tonight, we have a lot of members of the Racial Equity and Policing Commission here with us. I see Commissioner Tanya Hawkins. I see Commissioner Steve Angel-Weirden. I see Commissioner Matthew Schifflett, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Sagato Naga, Commissioner Salazar Hall, Commissioner Prospero, Commissioner Kaili, Commissioner Suarez, Commissioner Eldridge, Commissioner McDonald, Reverend Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Powell. I am sure that I've missed somebody, but that is extraordinary. Let me just pause and say how extraordinary it is to have so many members of the commission be here, but also so many members of our community be serving on this commission. For those who aren't aware, this commission has been meeting at least weekly for the last, 7 or 8 months. And it's truly remarkable given how much else is on each of their plates. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with members of the Training Subcommittee, because I want them to share a little bit about what it is that they've been discussing, and then invite the audience to give them some feedback on the recommendations that they're bringing forward as it relates to training. So I know that Commissioner Sagato Maga and I believe Commissioner Prospero are both here on behalf of the Training Subcommittee. Commissioner Sagato Maga, welcome to you. I think she's there. Hello. And Commissioner Prospero is there. You can't miss him. He stands out in more ways than one. Good to see you, sir. Let me start with this. I know that as it relates to racial equity in policing, when it comes to training, I know there was a real interest in helping to diversify the ranks of SLCPD, and in particular field training officers. For either of you, what can you tell the community about what you're recommending there?
I'll go ahead and take this one. You know, Salt Lake City is made up of a very rich and diverse group of people, and it's so important that the law enforcement that serve our community represents and matches that community, what that community looks like. And so what we found is that of the 67 field training officers that are in Salt Lake City Police Department, only 4 of them were people of color. Actually, it was 6, 2 Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders and 4 Hispanic police officers. And so our recommendation is that we make more of an effort and a push to bring on a more diverse police officer community. And so that's one of the things that we have recommended and we're really looking forward to seeing implemented.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner. And I also know that the training subcommittee spent a lot of time evaluating training for members of what's known as the Crisis Intervention Team, CIT. I wonder if either you or Commissioner Prospero want to speak to what you're hoping to see as it relates to training for the CIT program.
Sure, I'll take that. So, Salt Lake City Police Department, they're pretty aware that mental health is an important issue, something that we should officers should be able to be trained on. But what's always nice about having somebody from the outside to be able to see and evaluate where they're at with that training, and we saw some gaps. And so some of the recommendations that we had was to make sure that all officers are recertified. So instead of just one and done, I got my mental health training, check it off and I'm done, is to ensure that there's recertification for officers, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, and so forth. Because mental health, we're learning a lot, and so as we're learning, we should keep compiling on the basic information that we're getting. So again, recertify all officers. Another gap we found is when there's a lateral hire, meaning hiring officers, sworn officers from another police department, say West Valley or Draper police departments. They were not required to get that CIT certification. So that was one of our recommendations, that all lateral hires get that CIT training as well. So like that for sure. Yes.
I was just going to say, first of all, it's notable that the subcommittee, took this on, given the interest in our community, specifically in the way the police handles mental health calls. I remember from our January call, a number of commenters mentioned it. It also seems to me that there's an interest in sort of growing the ranks of folks who could take these kinds of calls on, that it isn't simply, some small strike force or lack of, for lack of a better word, but really try to get it across more of the department. Is that accurate?
So yes, I would say it's both. So like that, the entire police department, all officers then would have that kind of like basic knowledge of mental health. So if you do not have a mental health professional with you, you can at least have some basic knowledge to be able to hopefully de-escalate or be able to assess the situation and problem solve it. But they also do have I think it's called the Core Responder Model Unit, which is basically like the CIT team that has mental health professionals and police officers working together as a team, which is great to have. The gap in that is that they were basically only during one shift, and it was during the day shift, which the reason that they gave is because that's when most of their calls did come at that time. But that creates 2 shifts that do not have this mental health professional police officer team to be able to address those more intense interventions. So we recommended that they fill that gap and be able to have it 24/7, 7 days a week as well.
We should note also, and I'm going to come to Commissioner Sugata-Malga here in just a minute, we should note also that some of these recommendations we're discussing now are not news to the mayor and the city council. They've already been hearing about them as you all have been reaching consensus as a full commission on these recommendations. That applies to some, but not all of the recommendations we're going to hear about tonight. But I know that a great number of these have already come before the mayor and city council. Let me turn quickly back to Commissioner Sugata-Malga and just ask about the nature of who provides training to the police department. That seemed to be something that was very much on the minds of the commission, not just substantively what the training is, but also who does the provision of the training. And I just wonder, as it relates to who provides the training for police officers and what that training looks like. What are some of the things the subcommittee is hoping to see?
You know, I think we're hoping to see a diverse lineup of trainers. We'd like to see not just law enforcement, we'd like to see experts in the mental health field, social workers, therapists. We'd like to see community leaders training. Again, I mentioned earlier that it's so important that the people who are serving our community reflect our community. And so I think we'd love to see a diverse lineup, especially get those community leaders in there, community trainers, mental health experts. That's something that we'd really like to see.
As we put the slideshow back up on the screen here for just a minute, I want to just turn to other commissioners and see if any other commissioners wanted to speak to the training subcommittee's recommendations, but we're also going to take comments from the public at this point to find out how they feel about some of what Commissioners Prospero and Sagado Moga have just been sharing. So if our team can put the slideshow back up on the screen here in just a minute, we'll allow folks to see a couple of questions that they can respond to. And we can also encourage folks on the phone to be able to respond as well. So this is just meant to kind of get a sense of instant feedback from the community as to some of what is being presented. While we're waiting, I also want to let the community know that if you go to slcrepcommission.com, that's slcrepcommission.com, you'll be able to weigh in on all of these commission recommendations online at your leisure. So you don't just have to do it here during this meeting, you can also do it at any time that's convenient for you. If we could go to the next slide, that'll show us a poll question that just relates to what folks' thoughts might be on the recommendations from the training subcommittee. So you heard about diversifying the ranks of field training officers. You heard about training for the crisis intervention team. You also heard about a recommendation as it relates to who provides training and what they are trained on. So we'd like to hear what you would say about these recommendations. How do you feel about them? As you can see up on the screen, A would be very good, B would be good, C would be neutral or unsure, D would be not great, and E would be very concerning. I'll add that we're going to allow for some open-ended comments here in just a moment for folks to share with us more feedback on what they'd like to see out of the training subcommittee. I was just passed a note, passed a note that the mayor's requested budget, and maybe Mayor Mendenhall is able to share a little bit about this, but that her requested budget includes additional dollars for both social workers and for training, which I believe was partially at least in response to the commission's recommendations. So Mayor, I'm sure the commission appreciates how the budget is reflecting some of what they are interested in.
Did you want me to respond?
You certainly may. I was kind of trying to create some space there. So please, if you'd like to share anything as we wait for responses to come in, please.
Yeah, we absolutely took these recommendations into our budget. There's a recommendation for 6 additional social workers. My goal, and what we're hearing from the council's deliberations on the budget so far, is to meet that 24-hour coverage. But with the lack of patrol officers that we have right now, if we were to fund the total positions, which I believe would be 4 additional positions to meet that 24-hour coverage, we wouldn't actually be able to deploy those social workers because we wouldn't have enough officers to couple them with. So this is the pragmatic number at this point, 6 additional social workers, and we absolutely want to get to that coverage, even if it's in a budget amendment, but when we have the capacity. And then the $200,000, I believe it was, for the CIT training recommendations, and there were a couple of others, but we'll get to those subjects as you go on.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And just to acknowledge also the City Council will be taking a very close look at the budget proposal. I know there was a meeting maybe yesterday and some other public hearings coming down the pike for the public to be able to weigh in on all of the budget, not just the police budget in detail, so the council can find some consensus there. Well, thanks to those who have responded to this poll question. I'm going to skip to just another slide that allows for some open-ended comments about the recommendations from the training subcommittee. So this is just open-ended. What else would you like the training subcommittee to know? and you can respond online at pollev.com/KW-poll1. You can text KW-poll1 to 22333, or if you've already done that, then you can just start a text message and share with us what else the training subcommittee should know. For those who are listening on the phone, if you'd like to comment on the training subcommittee's recommendations or anything you'd like to see as it relates to training, please press 0, and you will be speaking with a call screener who's just going to take your name and your what you'd like to speak on, so that we get to you in the right part of the meeting, and then we'll be able to take your call live on the air. So again, if you'd like to speak on air about the training subcommittee's recommendations, press 0, and you can share your comment on air. For those who are listening in Spanish or in Arabic or in Mandarin, we're also going to attempt to incorporate comments from you all in those languages. I did notice a comment that came in on our Spanish line. I'm not sure that it is directly related to training, so I'm going to hold the comment here for just a minute. But just want to note, we do have folks listening to our live stream simulcast in Spanish, and we will get to comments in other languages as we have them. So again, we've got just an open-ended set of comments here, and for Commissioners Sagado Moga and Prospero, I don't know if you're able to track some of the comments that we are seeing. Certainly you're seeing a lot of approval and support for some of your recommendations. As you're seeing the comments come up on screen, just wonder if you have any reactions or thoughts.
Just real quick, one of the recommendations also is to ensure that all Salt Lake City police officers get the history of Salt Lake City when it comes to the race and ethnicity communities that are here, so that they could have a better understanding. So when they do address communities of color or different parts of the city, they have a better understanding of some reactions that they may face. And again, like that, you can assess the situation and be able to address it. And like they wrote, there was a comment there to be able to address issues without firearms, like that you can actually talk about it and be able to be more understanding, and therefore hopefully not use firearms themselves. So we are trying to put more of the community voice in there as well as the history too.
Thank you very much. Just opening the floor to other commissioners who wanted to share anything that they've heard. We've certainly wanted to keep the focus on the community as it relates to listening to community comments. And so you won't be hearing quite as much of a kind of a back and forth as you might hear at some public meetings, but we do welcome the commissioners to share their reflections on what they're hearing. And I see Commissioner Matthew Schifflett.
Good evening. I just wanted to also add that we are also talking about making sure that law enforcement knows the history of policing in general, not just here in Salt Lake City, but throughout the history of policing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's certainly been a active topic of conversation in the meetings that I've been in there.
And going forward, the approach of reality-based training, which takes experiences that are happening with residents in our city and our police department and incorporates them into the training going forward.
Thanks for that elaboration. And for others of our panel, if you'd follow the mayor's and the commissioner's great example with the raised hand, that helps me a great deal to make sure I don't miss anybody. So thanks to Commissioners Matthew Schifflett and Mayor Mendenhall for doing that. All right, well, we're going to move on from training now to a different topic. And that different topic, I believe, is going to be on the policies and practices side. So if we could take the poll question down for the time being, I want to welcome Commissioners Darlene McDonald and Steve Angel-Weirden from the Policies and Practices Subcommittee. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
There's been a lot to think about in the Policies and Practices Subcommittee. I know because I've been to some of the meetings. Also want to recognize my colleague, Josh King, who's facilitated in that session. But I know that there's a lot of topics of discussion, but one of them is body-worn cameras and the way for the Slcpd to best manage those devices, best review footage, best ensure best practices and so forth. To Commissioner McDonald or Commissioner Angel-Weirden, what can you tell us about the Commission's recommendations for how the police department will handle body-worn camera usage?
I can take this one. From an activist standpoint, the issue of body-worn cameras has been closely followed. So we've been particularly keen on this particular topic. And the Racial Equity in Policing Commission actually found that the Salt Lake City Police Department was very progressive already in their use of body-worn cameras and actually going above and beyond what the law actually requires. So that's actually a pretty good thing. Some of the recommendations that we put forth regarding the body-worn cameras is to make sure that the SLCPD designate that is designated by the mayor to randomly review and audit body-worn camera videos. That was one of the recommendations, and also to establish and develop the body-worn camera review and audits and conduct them and define uniform and consistent performance of the metrics that are received from the body-worn cameras. So this, especially in speaking as an activist and from an activist community, this is one that we definitely followed. And it was good to learn that Salt Lake City police departments were already doing above and beyond what was required by law on this one.
It goes without saying, and I barely need to say it, that this is a topic of national, maybe even international conversation. And it's great to hear that the commission and the subcommittee have been putting such a laser focus on it. I know also that there is an interest from the subcommittee in conducting a what's being called an internal implicit bias survey. And I don't know, Commissioner McDonald, if you want to speak to that, or Commissioner Angel-Weirden, just to share with the community what you're hoping for there.
I'd be happy to speak on this. Just on that last subject, I was struck by one of the comments that came up from a community member about the importance of accountability, right? So we had the chief, some of the other members of the department in the meeting on the body cam discussion, and it was really clear. First off, we requested it and expressed the importance of it, but it was clear that the department intends to take any breaches of that policy seriously and address those issues. So it goes beyond just the reviews and the audits, and if there is misconduct, then action can be taken. Commissioner Schifflett, I don't know if you want to jump in on the implicit bias survey here, because I believe you brought this to the table, but I'll be happy to start us out. And this is modeled after Q survey, that is a national survey, and Commissioner Schifflett brought it forward, and we all agreed that there would be value in having a look at our own departments to see where our officers in our department stands in terms of their awareness and the understanding of potential implicit bias. And some of the reasons that we want to do this are to get a baseline that can drive our next steps in our training and policy. Secondly, it's in-house data, so it's not theoretical. This is what's happening around the country, because departments are very different and officers are very different. We want to understand our own folks that we're working with, so that we can work specifically with where we are and try to improve that culture and those community relationships. And I also think it dovetails nicely with discussion that members of the training committee brought up about the community training, right? So what that will look like is community trainers or experts in equity issues working with the department and having conversations with officers. And it can give us a real baseline on where to start and where to address those issues, and then where to take subsequent conversations. So that's kind of an overview concept of implicit bias.
Thanks very much, Commissioner Angel-Weirden. I do want to give Commissioner Matthew Schifflett a chance to add. I just wanted to highlight the fact that you did have active duty members of the SLCPD, not just in your subcommittee, but in all the subcommittees, which is something that I think has probably added a lot of value and richness to the discussion. I know Commissioner Angel-Weirden himself is a veteran of law enforcement, as is Commissioner Suarez. So their perspective is certainly helpful there too. Commissioner Matthew Schifflett, anything you wanted to add on the survey?
I think you covered it all. I believe the only thing is it's very important to know what's going on in-house so that we can better train officers to understand what we need them to do moving forward.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit to go back to Commissioners McDonald and Jordan. We just talked with training a little bit about the significance of responses to mental health calls, and that did come up several times in our January community meeting. And I know that the Policies and Practices Subcommittee is interested in developing some sort of a co-response model for mental health calls. And then there was also some talk of what's being called a call diversion and dispatch strategy related to when folks call 911. So I think this is of significant interest to the community, and wondering if either Commissioner McDonald or Angela Worden could share a little bit more about what you're recommending.
I can start on this one, and I would love to also also hand it off to Commissioner Angela Worden, if I said your name correctly.
Very nicely, thank you.
This comes up a lot, to be quite honest. And because a lot of times we focus on physical health, we don't focus on the what's hidden. And what's hidden is mental health. We can't always see when someone is suffering a mental health crisis. And what we have found as we were working through this particular recommendation is that 25% of the calls to police department have to deal with mental health cases.
Remarkable.
Yes, it really is. And unfortunately, this also ties into access to healthcare and having mental health available as part of an access to healthcare. And if you don't have access to healthcare, then you most likely don't have access to mental health care. And that will increase the calls to police officers, which is why you have the data that comes back at 25%. Our subcommittee recommend a co-response model, and we say that is something that is needed and it should be expanded and prioritized. And that co-response model, as we found out, because of access to healthcare, disproportionately impacts communities of color because of that lack of access to healthcare.
And I wanted to mention that I remember hearing about a number of other police departments around the country who have already begun to implement models like this. I think one was known as the CAHOOTS model, if I'm not mistaken, up in Oregon. And so this is something that's very much also a national topic of conversation. Commissioner Angela Worden, anything you wanted to add also on this?
Yeah, if I may, just to augment Mr. McDonald's comments, and because of that disproportionate impact on communities of color, one of our recommendations is that we focus on communities of color and having conversations and educating communities of color on the police response and what it looks like, because there's so much, because of the level of mistrust, those calls can escalate to a higher level before law enforcement is called upon to assist, which can make them more volatile, right? So the better our relationship and better access, communities of color, well, all citizens, but in this case, it's disproportionate for communities of color, can have to law enforcement services, the more likely we can have better outcomes as a result of that. So that would be a focus on that education and outreach. Next is the co-response model has a good practice of case management strategies and developing wraparound services. And we really strongly recommend that they continue with that, partially because the immediate response is to de-escalate a situation and get it as calm as we can. Conduct an assessment about how we got to that situation. So hopefully we can prevent that from happening in the future. And then creating access to resources, community resources and mental health resources to help support those individuals, which honestly is a very humane approach to give people the best chance that they have to be successful. And there's a return on the investment for the department too, because it can reduce the number of calls. And so we think that that's a nice balance. Sure. And then finally, as you just mentioned, Larry, last recommendation in this area is to assess and potentially develop a civilian EMS response similar to Cahoots or Denver's STAR model. And I noticed that, again, one of the citizens watching, one of the individuals watching asked for more civilian response, and that can be a way that we can get access to that, as long as it's balanced and it's safe for all the folks to be.
I want to thank both of you so much. Certainly, if other commissioners want to add to their comments as we go, would appreciate it. But thank you for so much work and such a robust presentation. For those who are listening, if you'd like to comment on air about the recommendations you were just hearing about, or even the earlier ones, you can press 0 and you'll speak to a screener. I do know that we'll be taking one call here in just a minute from T20, who wanted to speak on a policy related matter. We're also going to put up on the screen, if I could, the pair of poll questions related to getting the community's reaction to some of what the Policies and Practices Subcommittee is recommending. So we should have that up on screen here momentarily, and there it is. We also want to let folks know that we're certainly lobbing a lot of information at you at one time. This commission, as I mentioned, has been meeting almost weekly for the last several months. And so there's a lot of work to talk about. As a result, we are having all of the recommendations available on slcrepcommission.com, slcrepcommission.com. I'll also be sharing at the end of the broadcast a way that you can call and leave a message or send a text message offline after this meeting is over. So if you are interested in getting more information about all of these recommendations and giving it some additional thought before you comment, you can certainly do so. Again, slcrepcommission.com. But up on the screen, we have sort of a quick reaction slide for those who want to share their thoughts on the recommendations you just heard from the Policies and Procedures Subcommittee. Again, A would be very good, B, good, C, neutral or unsure, D, not great, or E, very concerning. You can respond online or via text message, or if you're listening by phone, the operators will give you instructions for how to respond there. And in just a moment, we'll put up a kind of general response slide and allow for folks to share their feedback. And if you're just joining us, this is the Racial Equity and Policing Commission's listening session. I'm Larry Schooler, and we'll be with you for another 10 to 15 minutes to hear a little bit more about the commission's work and get a little bit more community feedback. Let's go ahead to the slide next, which will show a general open-ended comment form for folks who want to share their reactions to the Policies and Practices recommendations. So if you have a general comment, feel free to text it here. And again, in just a moment, we're going to go ahead and take a call. This call, I believe, comes in from T20. And T20, I hope I've said your name correctly. You should be on the air. Please go ahead.
T20, we've got you live. Go ahead with your question, please. Larry, we may need to read that one. I'm not sure if T20's got his line muted.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry, my phone was.
No problem.
I didn't realize that. Okay, thank you. Before my question, given that Salt Lake Valley has always been a gathering place for the indigenous peoples, we acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes, and is the crossroads for all of the Turtle Island native nomads and indigenous settlers. We stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters who are displaced Africans, Asians, and recognize that Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month is this month. And we also stand in solidarity and with the Palestinians and condemned the actions of the Israelis. My question is a bit of a twofold now that I've heard some of the policies, because I just want to get some clarity on that listening session we were just in. What my concern is these are trainings for the future, and is there a place that this curriculum is made public as to how the training will be informed by the curriculum? what data, what sort of is where, yeah, can we see the curriculum so that the public may review it rather than just, because I think that's something that's important, that the community be able to bring some feedback into that sort of policy making. I'm curious if officers are currently, excuse me, my TMJ is affecting how I speak today. If officers know QPR training, and the reason I ask this is because the majority of much of the response and what we're seeing in our communities is that responses to neurodivergent people often ends in a fatality. And I'm curious if they're aware that QPR exists and to utilize those QPR tactics before responding with anything other than less than lethal for someone like that. Kind of what I'm tying into that question is the recent clip of the Swedish officers that were tourists in New York City. And amongst the four of them, they were able to break up a violent fight that with their techniques of de-escalation managed to subdue those men without any harm, like any fatal harm to them.
Right.
And it seems like it was a quite easy technique to execute, and that there was some significant training for them to all be so coordinated, even on their personal time.
Well, Tikwani, I'm just really struck by the enormous breadth of everything that you shared there. I know that we have some police personnel still on the line. I believe that one of our chiefs is still with us. I'm not sure if he heard all of the comments, but there was a particular reference to a part of their training that I might want to get him to share some information about if he has it. But I wonder also, maybe for the training subcommittee, Commissioner Prospero, Commissioner Sagatomogo, any other commissioners, there was a comment there made about the possibility of having curriculum be posted publicly for SLCPD. I wonder if you have any just brief thoughts to that. And it's okay if you don't. It's a lot to take in. Again, I think we have one of our assistant chiefs with us, and I could be mistaken about that. I don't.
Yeah, Larry, I am here. What's your question?
Well, the caller made reference to, I think it was QPR training, and I hadn't heard that acronym before myself. I don't know if that's something with which you're familiar, but it seemed like she was generally talking about training to enable officers to respond without violence, without the use of their weapon and so on. And I don't know if there's anything very, very briefly, just because we do have one other subcommittee to get to, that you can share about what training SLCPD officers get in that space now.
We require CIT training for all of our officers, which is crisis intervention team training, which is directly related to mental health crisis, which would be the most similar to that I can talk about. And the Salt Lake City Police Department really was the pioneer in CIT training in Utah. But we require all of our officers to take the CIT course along with their academy training.
I also got a note that QPR refers to question, persuade, and refer gatekeeper training for suicide prevention, just to clarify that for folks that may be listening. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to go to another caller here from the community in just a moment. We're going to be hearing from Neil. But before I take him, I just wanted to mention that in response to the comment on training curriculum, my understanding is that it has yet to be developed, but that the commission is recommending that it be co-created by community trainers and police, so that the training, the new equity training, would be co-created with community trainers and police personnel. Let me go to Neil calling us tonight with, I think, another comment related to mental health. Neil, if you're there, you should be live on the air.
Yeah, thank you. You had mentioned that a certain percentage of calls to the police were for mental health issues. I wondered what the criteria are that you use to make that determination, and if those are criteria you use when the call comes in or only after it's been responded to. Thanks.
Neil, thank you very much. I don't know whether Commissioners McDonald or Angel-Weirden have that kind of information. Certainly welcome to have you respond if you'd like.
I don't see Commissioner McDonald. I want to make sure I'm not speaking. Short answer is I don't know that exactly how those are measured. The information from the department, but in my haste to respond, Larry, forgive me, I missed the two-part question, and we didn't really address the call diversion and dispatch, and I think it addresses this just a little bit.
Sure.
And the first is we recommend, and the commission would like to collaborate with public safety dispatch to have a better understanding of those 911 calls and how they're taken and they're directed. And it also goes to a comment that came across about bias that may be involved in the call that would generate a police response. Next is that and this is a big one, I can't believe I didn't say it, but collaboration with the community and a conversation about the way different segments of our community would like to be policed. Have that conversation between the department and the community, try to come together for mutual understanding of how we can most effectively do that. Again, that goes back to questions that were being asked about citizen input. Next is to add the concept of mental health into our 911 dispatch questions. So, well, this is 911, is this fire, health, police, or mental health emergency? So we can get off on the right foot by trying to identify what issues are there, which might go a little bit to what the caller was asking. And then finally, look at the possibility of establishing a civilian force and response team to handle lower level investigations and lower risk calls. So just a few things that we didn't address, but most of them came up in the conversation. So just to quickly circle back to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I mean, I think that it's quite clear that the need for proper attention from well-trained professionals to mental health matters is critical, and that has to come both within the department, the police department, as well as potentially with some partnerships. That's what I've heard you all say loudly and clearly. I'm seeing a number of tremendous comments come through over text and online, and I want to just let everyone know that we will be capturing all of the comments and posting them online for the commission to be able to review. That'll be posted at slcrepcommission.com, slcrepcommission.com, and if you're wanting to, you can go there now and see the recommendations and comment on them by subcommittee. Again, slcrepcommission.com. I want to stop screen share for another minute because we have one other subcommittee whose work has been extremely extensive. And for conversations about school safety, I want to turn to Commissioner Nicole Salazar Hall, who I know is also joined by Commissioner Moises Prospero. Commissioner Salazar Hall, great to have you. Thank you. I know that a lot of the focus when it comes to school safety for folks might be on the school resource officer institution program, SRO. And I know that you all have dug deeply into the way the program works now, the relationship between the police department and the school district and the city. Can you just share with us, I guess, a little bit about what you're hoping will happen going forward with the SRO program, what the subcommittee is recommending?
Yeah, I'll handle that question, Larry. Thank you. We've dug quite deep into the SRO program. Presently, there is a memorandum of understanding between the Salt Lake City School District and Salt Lake City Police Department. The memorandum was an excellent start. What we want to see happen is measurable goals for the memorandum of understanding to make sure that our students are being best served. Presently, we don't have really any data on SRO interactions with students in our schools. it's possible to get that data, but we need to start collecting that data to know whether students of color are being disproportionately having negative interactions with our SROs. We don't know. We've heard a lot of mixed stories from students, parents, and SROs about positive and negative interactions. And presently, we don't have enough data to determine whether the overall SRO program is a positive impact or a negative impact on our students. And of course, we all want a positive impact. We want to put a stop to the school to prison pipeline. And as we know, students of color are disproportionately impacted by that school to prison pipeline. The current MOU is set to expire at the beginning of this next school year. We have
That's a memorandum of understanding for this.
Yes, sorry. Short-term memorandum of understanding is an MOU. That is set to expire at the new school year. We have a new superintendent for the Salt Lake City School District coming on board, I believe in June. Our hope is to be able to renegotiate or have that MOU renegotiated so that we can have some measurable goals put in place. We don't want to disadvantage our officers. We want to make sure we have some good data to work with to know how to improve the program, make changes to the program. We also have recommended that the city hire a full-time employee to specifically address the school to prison pipeline. The full-time employee's full job description has not been completely fleshed out because we wanted to make sure that it would best serve the needs of the Salt Lake City Police Department, best serve the needs of the city and the needs of the Salt Lake City School District. We didn't want to recommend a really tight sort of description and have that position fall short of what we're hoping it will accomplish, which is full communication across all three agencies for the benefit of our students of color and all of our students in Salt Lake City.
And just if I can interject, my understanding is that that is part of Mayor Mendenhall's recommended budget, that particular position that you just mentioned. So nice to hear that there's a connection being made. And I just want to make sure to underscore a point that I heard you make there, which is that this commission, this body is not yet recommending any sort of disbanding of the school resource officer program or the elimination of school resource officers, but instead some reform, some rethink, some changes to the strategy, that all of that is top of mind.
Right. We don't have enough data to say whether we should disband it or continue it. So the default really is continue it and see what we can get into place. Certainly the school resource officers I've spoken with in our subcommittee meetings are absolutely committed to these students, they love their jobs. They love being school resource officers. They want to see good things happen with these students. So if there are positive impacts, we don't want to take that away from our students. If this is a good thing for our students, we want that to continue. But if it's not good, what can we do to change it so it is something that is positive? Or if there's a different way of doing it, maybe we could implement those changes.
And I know that I've had the chance to speak directly with school resource officers, so I can attest to what you're saying, but also that there are a number of folks who want to see the way that the SROs work with our schools and with our students to evolve. Want to also mention or have you chat briefly about the Promising Youth Project and the Peer Court, which are both really interesting innovations. I see Commissioner Prospero there. What can you share with us about the School Safety Subcommittee's thoughts on those programs?
Yeah, the Promising Youth Project, PYP, it started as a gang prevention intervention program within the Salt Lake School and within the Salt Lake City Police Department. And then they changed it to become more of a crime prevention as well. So it's not just gang involvement, but crime prevention and intervention. But it was very small. And so they worked hard to get some money to bring in some social workers to be able to address the needs of our community here in Salt Lake City. And their purpose is really to implement best practice and to try to keep our kids out of the system. Very close to the topic of school to prison pipeline, where we don't want to criminalize regular adolescent behavior, send them into law enforcement or court referrals, and then as the deeper they get in, the more likely they are to graduate into the adult system, meaning jails and prisons. And so instead, let's try to see what are their needs, what are the criminogenic needs that they have, these factors that may be related to future delinquency, and then what are their strengths, what are the things that they really like. So let's case manage that, get them involved in pro-social positive youth development programs, and try to address those needs that they may have. They may have antisocial attitudes. They may not have any leisure opportunities that are pro-social. Hey, all I know is I could just go hang out and drink, versus, oh, you know what? There's this great performing arts project over here that you can really get involved with, that it seems like you really like. And then from there, try to keep them into the positive lifestyle.
Sure.
And they would work in conjunction with the SROs. And that is the big one. So like that, the SROs now have somewhere to refer. Right. Instead of, and you hear this from a lot from law enforcement, even in patrol, I don't know what else to do. And so now I have a place to refer, and they're in my shop too. They're in the police department. What were you going to ask, Henry?
No, I was only going to see if Commissioner Powell might want to chime in a little bit. He is, as his picture, as his little square might indicate, probably closer to this phase of life than anyone else in this meeting.
What?
To embarrass him at all. Well, Commissioner Prospero, close second. But Commissioner Powell has been part of the commission as well as the youth subcommittee, which obviously has taken a very close look at all of these matters. Before I call on Commissioner Powell, I just do want to mention that funding for the peer court is included in the mayor's recommended budget, which, as I mentioned, is in process. I also want to mention that if folks want to speak about school safety specifically, now would be a good time to press 0 and get into our queue if you'd like to make a comment on air. But Commissioner Powell, anything that you wanted to add to what was presented by Commissioners Salazar, Hall, and Prospero?
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Moises, and fellow commissioners. As a youth subcommittee member, it's been a real pleasure to have this opportunity to be able to work with other educated individuals and to be invited to the roundtable per se, as well as to be able to do my best to provide input from the younger youth perspective. As we know, it's been a long year, and the weekly meetings have shown that this commission is well on its path to instituting and establishing the proper framework for Salt Lake City and our police department to not only properly community police, but also get along with the community it's policing. And so with the new projects Moises was referring to, we're in strong support of these, as we think that a full-time position is necessary to discuss the school to prison pipeline. And we also do believe that we need someone that can kind of provide an exclusive independent framework. So having the viewpoints of other community members in that process is extremely extensive in our work. It's also exciting to see the polls today and to see that the community is majority in support of what we're doing. It makes me as a young person feel affirmed in the work I'm doing. And it's good to see that our leaders, such as Mayor Mendenhall and the city council staff and Amy Fowler, have really been there and proactively wanting to work with us and listen to us. So thank you to our city and leaders, and also our police department for being there off camera to have really important conversations to understand mutual perspectives.
As the parent of 2 school-age children, I could tell you Commissioner Powell does his homework, because I often have to tell my children to do theirs, and I know he does his without anyone having to ask. But all the commissioners, of course, have been doing extraordinary hard work. I'm going to put up on the screen just our standard couple of questions to the community around reactions to what you're hearing from the school safety subcommittee as it relates to the ongoing relationship with school resource officers, the Promising Youth Program, and the peer court. And so, as we did before, we'd like to know your thoughts on their recommendations just overall, and then we'll put up another screen to allow for general comments. And again, if you have comments you'd like to share on air, you can make them by pressing 0 and speaking to a call screener. I want to just mention a Spanish language comment that came in Spanish earlier in the evening. It's not exactly on topic, but I think it's fairly relevant. This came from Diego Munoz. He says, there's not safety at the school Rose Park. We'd like to see a police officer there watching the kids. So I'm reading verbatim from the interpreter. There's not safety at the school Rose Park. We'd like to see a police officer there watching the kids. I know we have at least one more caller that we're going to get to here in just a moment. So we'll do that and leave the poll question up for just another minute. Again, talking about school resource officers, talking about a position within the city that would help to liaise between the city, the school district, and the officers. Also talking about the Promising Youth Program and the peer court, all coming from the School Safety Subcommittee of the Racial Equity in Policing Commission. So with your high-level reactions, you can text A, B, C, D, or E, or go online to make those comments. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a comment on the phone. Actually, before I do that, I see there is a comment that was posted on Facebook, and I hope I say the name correctly, Bobby N. Belinda Saltivan. The comment is, do you think one person is enough to look at the school to prison pipeline, or is this simply a start? Before I get reactions to that comment, I want to go to Tikwani, who I believe has joined us again with a comment related to school safety. So we'll get her onto the line here in just a moment. While we do that, we have another comment from Facebook from Gail Dawes that says, what are your thoughts concerning the critical race theory discussion? What are your thoughts concerning the critical race theory discussion? I think it's fair to say we won't have much time to get into the depths of that, given how sophisticated a conversation that is. I see Commissioner Powell applauding for the question, but we are going to go to Tikwani, who had joined us earlier, but has some other comments related to the SRO program, I believe. And so let's see if we can get the line unmuted, and then we will go to Tikwani when we have that line unmuted. And we can go ahead and advance to the next poll question with general comments now that we've gotten the high-level thoughts. So folks that have general comments.
I'm unmuted, I think.
Yes, you sure are. Tikwani, please.
Okay. So I'm a 41, almost 42-year-old student of an incredibly diverse school district in Dallas, Texas, which was predominantly Black and brown. And it was Carter High School. And I can tell you from my personal experience, that was a little over 2 decades ago, SROs only represented forces of antagonism and a sense of internalized racism that perpetuates quite a lot of the biases that we see that are associated with SROs within the Black and brown school systems, and how a lot of those racist ideologies seep in and affect the quality of care and the quality of safety that our children have, and the protections of objective policing that just simply can't be met without a cultural understanding of how we correct our youth, and how elders within the multichotomies of communities that exist here, how we call in our youth and how we correct our youth, and how this way is not the way for children. Children should not be policed. Children should not go to school and fear this authoritarian influence around them, and so they can get a quality education. And I disagree with having SROs. As being a child of a family of several generations of students who've passed through the SRO system, only to experience how much of my family had been affected by it, because they were sucked in by that vortex of the school to prison pipeline, right, of having friends, people I love, who go to prison for, youthful folly that ended up being criminalized because there's an SRO officer. There's an SRO rather than an elder.
Right.
Or And it bothers me that you don't have KPR and that SRO officers who are in our schools in a state that has such highest numbers of youth self-harm and youth completions, that you don't have officers that are QPR trained. It's disturbing to know that this is the first time y'all are hearing of it when it's existed for quite a while. And I'm wondering why there seems to be quite a lot of reinvention of processes when there's already good stuff that works out there.
Right.
And why that's just not simply being incorporated in that the current training exists, modalities. It's just, we need to keep our kids safe.
Sure.
And cops have no business in our schools. Maybe surrounding perimeters and that sort of thing, but we need to have principles and ways of being able to de-escalate, even in, like I said, in the most dangerous situations.
Sure.
The evidence exists that we can do that.
Tiquani, I just want to thank you for sharing so personally on this topic, because it's not every day that we can get the input from someone directly impacted by the subject that we're discussing. And I heard the significance to you of wanting students to be safe, but feeling as if a police officer, a school resource officer may not be the best way to achieve that goal. So I want to thank you for your comments, and I'm only moving ahead in the conversation because of our time. But again, thank you for both of the calls you placed to us tonight. You'll see up on the screen some of the comments coming in via text message and online. And so I know that it is difficult to respond to all of the comments that we get in a forum like this. This is a listening session, and so the focus is meant to be primarily on listening to the community's responses, their feedback. I think we had a little bit of an issue there, so we'll come back to it. But I want to just open the floor. I know that a number of commissioners haven't had a chance to speak tonight because we've been focused on a couple from each subcommittee. So want to let other of our commissioners, Commissioners Hawkins, Suarez, Davis, Eldridge, Johnson in particular, if there's anything you wanted to share that you haven't had a chance to in terms of either what you've heard from the community or a recommendation that you want to make sure is given significant attention.
The one area of this is Commissioner Davis, and the one area that I'm concerned about that we've talked about is doing and making these changes as soon as possible, that they happen in the training and they happen in terms of the policies and practice, but happen as soon as possible.
Thanks very much, Reverend Davis. And I think it's very significant that this commission has been able to convey recommendations as they agree upon them, as opposed to waiting until the very end with some big report. Because as a result of being able to do that, the mayor and the city council have been incorporating the recommendations as best they can as they're getting them, which I think is a really impressive feedback loop, if you will, in terms of the community feeding back to the commission, then up to the council, and then some action being taken. Other commissioners who hadn't had a chance to speak that want to share?
Hi, this is Commissioner Suarez. Just one of the things that the training subcommittee is working on is the hiring process of police officers, looking at to get a diverse group of people in the door and then to able to keep them as officers. So we are working on that, and I just wanted to include that.
Thank you, Commissioner Suarez. Before another commissioner speaks, I just want to share a couple of other public comments, and we're also going to put the text and online comments up on the screen. On Facebook, Shelley McKissick wrote, "Today, racism doesn't have a color. It is spreading fast to all genders, age, and color." I read that verbatim. Another comment, Ray James Duckworth wrote on Facebook, "If Black kids can experience racism, white kids can learn about it." And as you can see, there are additional comments that are up on the screen, and I'm actually going to disable the scrolling, or at least try to slow it down there a little bit, because I know that it's hard to probably keep up with the scroll as it moves through. The point there was just to make sure that folks get to see all of the comments. But again, all of these comments will be posted online at slcrepcommission.com for folks to be able to read them in more depth and get a chance to weigh in on them in more depth. There was a comment made as it relates to models, training models that may have been considered by the commission. I understand from the meetings I've been in that much of the work has been rooted in the report on 21st century policing and noted best practices. But of course, there are lots of models. And so if there are folks out in the community that want to make sure certain models are evaluated, we would love to hear that. Other commissioners that wanted to speak, I think I may have left off Commissioner Johnson on my list, but any other commissioners that hadn't gotten a chance to speak that wanted to? As we prepare to close our broadcast tonight, I want to again mention to you all that there are going to be ways for you to continue being part of this conversation over the next couple of months. The main way is to be going to slcrepcommission.com. That's slcrepcommission.com. But there's also a way for you to give us your input if you don't have a computer or if you don't have reliable internet access. And so I'm going to be in a moment sharing my screen, and I'll be putting up on the screen a way for folks to call and leave a voicemail, to send an email, or to send us a text message, irregardless of what day or time it is. So you'll be seeing that information coming up on my screen here in just a bit. But the commission is going to be taking all of these comments into consideration, and they will be continuing to meet on an almost weekly basis, either in full commission or subcommittee on Wednesday evenings, Wednesday afternoons and evenings over the next few weeks, at least through May and into June. And I believe that there are conversations about the commission's work continuing even beyond that period of time. And so these are topics that obviously can't get fully addressed in short order. And I know that the commission will want to continue to hear your comments as their work continues. But I will here in just a minute be putting up a couple of pieces of information for you all as for how you can continue to weigh in. So first of all, we want to thank you for sharing your voice. That's number one. And we will have recordings of this session posted on Facebook and YouTube connected to Salt Lake City and to the commission. But here on the screen are the different ways that you can continue the conversation with us. You can go to the website that I keep talking about, slcrepcommission.com. You can call 801-708-0935. That's 801-708-0935, and leave a message there that will be responded to by either a commissioner or a member of staff. There's also an email account just for the commission. That's repcommission@slcgov.com. That's repcommission@slcgov.com. And last but not least, if you'd like to text us, text the word equity to 801-575-7755. Again, the word equity to 801-575-7755, and there will be some prompts for you to review after you've sent that initial text message. Well, as we continue to get to the end of our broadcast, there just are so many people that I need to acknowledge, and I'm actually going to call a little bit of an audible and embarrass one of our team members a little bit by recognizing first and foremost Coletta Lynch, who has been the linchpin, pardon the pun, of the Racial Equity and Policing Commission, and most importantly for our purposes, has just been named the Chief Equity Officer for Salt Lake City. There is lots of applause, even though there's no sound. There's lots of applause, and I know that Ms. Lynch is probably not going to let us see her bright smiling face. She's very modest, but know that we are very proud to know that you will continue to be a part of the staff and be at an even more senior level in this new role, and I know that you'll do great things. But without Coletta Lynch, there would be no Racial Equity and Policing Commission at all, and there certainly would be no meeting tonight. So for that and so much else, thank you very, very much. Coletta is assisted by a whole team of folks, including Cindy Lou Trishman, who's been doing a tremendous amount of work tonight to help this meeting happen, as well as to make all of our meetings happen. I know that Lahua was on with us here a little while ago. She does a lot for the commission. Lindsay Nicola, Jennifer Bruno, just a whole host of staff people. And I apologize if I've omitted anyone. I know we had folks who assisted on the, Roxana helped us with the interpreters as well. We had folks from Telephone Town Hall Meeting helping us to screen in English and Spanish. We also had Marjorie Lynn and Ray Ziet, who have been helping us in Mandarin and Arabic, which is a tremendous task. And I appreciate their staying on for the duration. Of course, want to thank Mayor Mendenhall, council members Fowler, Mono, and Dugan for their steadfast participation in all of this. I want to thank Deputy Chief Purvis, or Assistant Chief Purvis, forgive me if I've gotten that off, but thank you, and thank the entire department for their sustained involvement in this work. And of course, most importantly, thank you to the commission. I'm realizing I'm omitting SLCTV, which made this event happen tonight. But in addition to the team at SLCTV, thank you so much to the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. All of their names and pictures of the folks who are here tonight are there for you. I won't read all the names here at this point, but know that your participation has been just invaluable. I also want to give credit to my colleagues, Dante James, Siobhan Locke, and Josh King, and the folks at the Langdon Group who have been facilitating alongside with me. And what the heck, I'm going to thank my wife and kids for staying quiet while I facilitated this meeting tonight. But to all of them and to all of you who joined us tonight with such robust commentary, we want to say thank you very much for being a part of this important conversation. Please stay tuned online and via text message and via phone, and we will continue to update you as we work towards racial equity in policing. So on behalf of the Racial Equity in Policing Commission in Salt Lake City, I'm Larry Schooler. Thank you and good night.